Ready to go now with the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. A lot to get to for you this evening. With us, as always, Jeffri Chadiha from the NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. I'm going to be covering the Chiefs Stadium. The state of Kansas has passed the Star bonds. We'll talk about what that means for the stadium moving forward. Isaiah Buggs arrested a second time. The Chiefs, now even details about what happened in it. The Chiefs, when will they make a move on that? And, of course, our top 5 all-time quarterbacks. Does Patrick Mahomes crack the list? If he does, where does he rank? We break it all down right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeffri Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is the sports columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis, and welcome to another edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. We're planning on just getting to the quarterbacks. Didn't know how much news we'd get. Of course, there was more bad news from the offseason from the Kansas City Chiefs. I guess we should start to expect that. I don't think that's unfair with the kind of offseason that the Chiefs have had. And then, of course, stadium news. Sam, let's start right there with you on that. The Star bonds have been passed in Kansas. What does it all mean?
Yeah, so Kansas has long had Star bonds to fund projects, but this is like a supercharged version of it, they're calling it. So the Senate and the House passed it. The Kansas legislature passed it. Governor Kelly has indicated she's not going to veto it, so she'll either sign it into law or just let it pass without her signature. But effectively, it allows that up to 70% of a project of this magnitude can be paid for with Star bonds, which is you get the bonds issued, and then sales tax revenue from the project itself goes back and pays back those bonds, likely over a 3-decade period. So, I mean, look, the big picture headline of this for people is that this is something that supersedes financially any offer that the Chiefs or Royals will get from Missouri. I mean, that's going to be a fact. Like, Missouri is not going to be able to match what this project could potentially do financially for these teams and what the amount that it could pay for. Having said that, you know, the Chiefs do have ties to Arrowhead Stadium. That hasn't changed. There's a reason that the Chiefs initially tried to renovate Arrowhead Stadium, that was their first choice. That still in their minds remains their first choice. But they now could have an offer in front of them that might be too good for them to pass up.
Yeah. How about it, Jeff? Is your gut telling you that was it? The Kansas got it passed, and now we're going to see the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas here at some point?
Well, I felt like it was trending that way from the time this vote didn't work out. And I have a hard time believing the Chiefs aren't excited about the position that they're sitting in. I mean, we know the numbers now that Kansas can put together, and now it's a question of whether Missouri can come close. And as Sam just said, it's hard to believe that they can actually compete with that. And so I think the Chiefs were already in a great situation because no matter what they do, it's not going to upset fans. They're winning championships. They've become a dynasty. Everybody loves them. You're not facing some of the issues that the Royals have, even though they're winning now too. So I think that's like if you're Clark Hunt, you're sitting there and someone's talking about funding your stadium up to 70%, and you've already got an obvious location with resources in place, shopping and restaurants and all that stuff, and you can add to it. I mean, why wouldn't you do it? It makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't see the negative here. I don't see why you don't do it other than, hey, we're familiar. We know the area. We know the people. We know how it works. Over on the Kansas side, that's the one reason, I guess, that I come up with that I think you could, say, all right, well, for lack of a better term, a devil we do know, right? There's always going to be intricacies and things that happen. At least you know how things work over in Jackson County. But listen, I thought we played a cut from Sean Tarwater, who his final statement before they had the vote, he said, are we going to keep these teams in Kansas City? I think that's overplayed. Yeah. But, I understand why Sean Tarwater, the people in Kansas and the scoop and score people are playing that. I don't think they're one step away from heading to San Antonio or wherever. But I do think ultimately that comes up, right? You do have to find a new facility for both these teams in Kansas City sometime in the fairly near future, or that will come into play. I'd rather it not really come into play, and if it takes some of those words to do it. But he goes, Missouri's made a habit of losing teams. Kansas City Scouts, the Kansas City Kings, he didn't even mention the St. Louis Cardinals, the St. Louis Rams. They have lost a team in every sport and 2 in football.
That's cold-blooded right there, isn't it?
St. Louis, the St. Louis Hawks, in the NBA. He didn't mention them if we're just going to take the whole state of Missouri. And listen, I don't like that. I'm not a Team Kansas or Team Missouri guy. I live in Kansas. I was born in Missouri. I love both states. I love the area. I didn't go to either one of the schools, so I don't get caught up in any of that crap. So all I care about is the Metro, and that includes both states. So I really don't care where the stadium is as long as it's here in town. But, I mean, that's real. I mean, I hate to say it. I hate that for Missouri. I hate that is true. But they have made a habit of losing teams. So if not now, then when? And, Sam, you'd probably know best. When would the state of Missouri, or will the state of Missouri, step up and offer a counter to maybe try and save this team?
Yeah, so that's the distinct difference between what we're seeing in Kansas versus what we saw in Missouri pre-April 2nd, was that, in Missouri, they recognized that the state was probably not going to support this project in a considerable way. And so the funds were going to be county-wide. And so it was a very hyper-local pitch to try and get a sales tax passed on the ballot. This, first of all, does not require a vote. But you're not talking about Wyandotte County. You're not talking about Johnson County. Like, this is at the state level, because that's where the star bonds can be facilitated. And by the way, it's not just the star bonds that were in this bill. This bill will also allow them to use excess lottery revenue. Anything beyond, I think it's $71.5 million can be facilitated towards a stadium. They estimate that's going to be about $10 million a year. That's a chunk of change that adds up. In addition, it's the gambling revenue. But what's interesting about this, and when you talk about teams leaving the state, is the minute on April 3rd, I told somebody with the Chiefs, I said, you guys gained leverage by a failed vote. And I don't know how many teams, once they had a vote failed, would say, we might be in a better spot today than we were with the vote we just tried to have pass. And the reason they are is because most teams, when they have to make that decision, as those teams you listed, Soren, to leave a state, they leave their fan base behind. The Chiefs in this situation, to your point, would not be leaving a fan base behind. Like, their avenue to potentially, quote unquote, relocate, which is not a term you'll hear them use, by the way, because of that lawsuit against the Rams. This is not a relocation. It's the same media market, but it would be a relocation technically in terms of their stadium would be in a different location, right? It'd be in a different state. They would have the same fan base in that sense. Now, I do think everything you said, Soren, I understand that you love both states, but there is a thing with Kansas and Missouri.
Oh, for sure there is.
This would alienate, right? There's not with you, but this would alienate some fans.
Sure.
Like, that would have to be part of their calculus, and it's why I keep saying, like, all things equal or even close to equal, the Chiefs would be staying where they are. Again, I underscore it all the time for a reason. They went to the ballot box in Jackson County to renovate Arrowhead Stadium first. They told us what their preference was. That preference hasn't changed, but the options have. And that could potentially change what they end up doing. So what's going to be, and sorry to drone on here, but it's an important thing to say, what's going to be the response from Missouri? The legislature there is a mess. We just saw this pass with flying colors, by the way, in the House and the Senate in Kansas. The legislature in Missouri does not have this support. They have come out again and again and again with this Freedom Caucus and said, we don't have the appetite for something like that, which means that would kick the Chiefs and Royals back to the Jackson County level where they don't have support from the executive there. So I see a lot of really fine thread through the needle that it's difficult on the Missouri side. And Kansas has just told the Chiefs and Royals it's not difficult over here.
By the way, I'm getting grief from Tommy because I'm wearing an Emporia State shirt. For those that are catching us on the podcast, you can see us scream and be a part of the chat room. I've got Missouri State. I've got whatever my interns give me, right? Like if the interns give me the shirts of their schools, then I got it. Except for the KUK State Missouri kids, I won't accept any of those because that really pisses people off. But I thought I could wear Emporia State, Northwest Missouri State, and not get upset. But somehow now here comes the state thing, and Tommy's on me for wearing an Emporia State shirt. By the way, we're
sorry to interrupt, Soren, because we need to get in this ad. But if people are upset about Emporia State, then that just really doubles down on my Missouri versus Kansas.
I know. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, every project coming with a written warranty, there's only one choice when it comes to your parking lot. It's GAN Asphalt and Concrete. They keep your parking lot safer, help you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Everything comes with a written warranty. You know what you're getting with GAN Asphalt and Concrete. That's why for 30 years, they've been Kansas City's choice to solve any and all parking lot problems. You can find them online right now at GANAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. And so do you expect a rebuttal, Sam, from Missouri? Do you expect anything? They don't move quickly. They've been trying. We heard about a 316 sales tax. What do you expect we will hear from Missouri now?
You're going to hear a rebuttal from individuals. The question is whether or not those individuals are going to be enough to comprise, again, an override of like Frank White. I don't think Frank White's position is going to change on this. Manny Abarca, a county legislator, has already put forth something, that would be in a different bucket, but the capital improvements tax that he'd have to change to the 1/4 tax. That's a Chiefs only proposal. I see a rebuttal for the Royals from the city. But it's not the same avenue that Missouri can give or the city can give to the Chiefs because they're in a county-owned building at Arrowhead Stadium. And so it's going to be up to the county. And whether or not they get enough of those 9 legislatures, it would require 6 to override Frank White's potential veto. They got it last time. I think they could get 4 or 5. I think 6 would be shaky. So I think it's a real question whether or not the Chiefs want to do that dance again, though.
Yeah, I do too. We got a number of people from Missouri saying, hey, Missouri residents aren't going to go over there. They'll lose half. Missouri residents, they will lose some. There's no doubt. I mean, just the proximity part of the equation. The ones that had the closer drive that are not going to have the further drive, they'll struggle with that. The question is, do they pick up Kansas residents on the other side when it's all said and done? Jeff, what's your gut tell you this ends up being? That we get Chiefs in Kansas, Royals in Missouri? Sam talked about the Royals plan that could be coming. We get them both in Kansas. I mean, the Royals did hire, I'm told, 8 or 9 lobbyists to go and work the room for something in Kansas. I think the Chiefs thing is much further along, but I think the Royals could catch up. What does your gut tell you this plays out?
I think splitting them up is very helpful to the Chiefs. Does John Sherman still have this dream of a downtown baseball stadium, or is he more willing to say, I'll take whatever I can get now? I mean, the kind of numbers, again, that you saw how fast it operated, how fast things went down in Kansas with the Chiefs. That's got to catch their attention. So I'm sure they'd love to be a part of it. I think the Chiefs are going to go, unless barring some crazy thing happening here. I think it was Terry mentioned the gambling part of it. That's a lot of revenue. And I almost wonder, can Kansas even make this play without having legalized gambling behind it? Because it certainly creates a lot more security in having to go down this road with the star bonds. But I think it's already a done deal. And it sucks for Missouri to hear this, what I'm about to say, but the Chiefs probably don't care if they lose Missouri because the people who are paying to go to the stadium are going to keep paying to go. I've been to every stadium in the NFL. Go to New York City, and you're going to find a whole lot of Jets fans who remember the Jets playing in Long Island. They play in New Jersey now, and they're still Jets fans. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. The money that is going to be lost is not going to be lost from people who are going to games or people who are watching the games. It's going to be more of like a political diplomacy type thing that's going to be at play here with the Chiefs moving on. I think they're going.
Yeah, Sam, what you got to say? How's it finish?
Yeah, I mean, I still think they're going to have their ears open for what Missouri presents. And it's a really hard question mark for me. But Missouri's actions so far at the state level and the county level do not give confidence that something's going to suddenly come together there. And by the way, these two teams did not present the voters with good proposals. I know a lot of people are going to turn back at the voters and say, this is your fault, that this avenue was open because of the voters. While the cause and effect of that is accurate, that does not absolve the fact that the Royals and Chiefs did not give the voters something that they could vote on and pass. That element of that still falls at the team's feet. Having said that, I'm sure the Chiefs knew that Kansas was going to be an option. Kansas was flush with money at the state level. And, they tied themselves to the Royals, which certainly brought their own support down for their project. And therefore, I think, in some ways they thought that risk was a little bit minimal.
Yeah, listen, the Chiefs absolutely do this. If I knew that there were different people waiting to just step in and go, then they knew. And I'll be clear, if you listen to my radio show, I said it time and again. I don't, like I said, I don't care which side of the state line the stadium's on, but I said here, if you're Jackson County, you know this. This is the one that I don't like the plan to dump money into an old Arrowhead. I like the Royals plan, right? I didn't like the Chiefs one. I said, but if what you want is to make sure that the Royals and Chiefs play their games in Jackson County, Missouri, you should go to the polls and vote yes, if that is your number one priority. Because as soon as this doesn't pass, Kansas will be there. So, I know not everybody listens to sports talk radio, but if you listen to my show, this is exactly what we all knew was coming. And that was no crest. Sam, you knew it was coming. I'm not the only one. Like, this is exactly the way it was going to play out. Now the question is, can Missouri circle the wagons? And in all likelihood, I think the answer is probably no. So now we sit back and see how fast it goes. It's clear the Chiefs are the priority and the Royals are second. I think, Missouri needs to start trying to save the Royals for downtown Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, friend, I know we're on a Chiefs podcast, but let's be real about the Royals' plan here, which was their whole plan was to move downtown, and to move where the action is. Moving to Kansas does not, it doesn't fit with that. It's disingenuous for them to suddenly move to Kansas. And by the way, they haven't said they're going to do that. They view this as an option. And they'd be fools not to look at this option. Like, they have to look at this option. So I have no blame for them whatsoever for doing that. But it doesn't fit the reason they wanted to move. With the Chiefs, they gave the voters an option to stay where they are. The Royals didn't give the voters that option. And so I can see the Chiefs saying, we allowed you guys to keep what you had going. You voted against it, and therefore we're moving. The Royals didn't allow the voters to keep what they had going. Their move was always to go somewhere else. And there's a reason they were going downtown. And again, that's why I think the city somehow tries to get involved, and it can get more involved with the Royals project than it could with the Chiefs renovation project, by the way.
But would that matter? Because as much as I hear what you're saying, that they didn't give, it wasn't a apples and apples. It was an oranges over here for the Royals were moving, and it was here's our apples with the Chiefs were staying. But I hear just as many people, and it's in the chat room, and people are like, we didn't get a vote on a dome. On the Missouri side, I'd have voted for a dome. Yeah. So I don't know that you don't just flip, okay, the Royals people that voted no because they didn't like going downtown, if you flipped it and put a dome on it, on the Chiefs side, said, well, we're going to build a dome here, would that have done it? I don't think so.
It wouldn't have done it for the owner, because, I mean, that's the difference in that. And what we're seeing in Kansas versus Missouri is.
But don't you agree that that's a fair complaint from Missouri people to say, wait a minute. If you wanted a dome, then tell us you want a dome and let us at least vote and lose on what it is you ultimately want.
That's also more expensive, though, right?
Yeah, it's a significant amount more money, not only for the voters and the potential taxpayers. You'd have to have a different number on the ballot, but also for the owner himself here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what's going to be interesting about this project is, while this could potentially fund 70% of a project for the Chiefs, the total number that ownership would have to devote to such a project with a new build would still be more than the money that they were pledging to renovate Arrowhead Stadium. And I don't know how Clark Hunt views that, whether he just views it as a percentage breakdown, because the percentage breakdown would be less on him. He's never going to have a better deal to build a new stadium if that's what he wants to do. But the total lump sum is going to be more than what it would be in Missouri, because they've estimated, I know in the legislature today and yesterday when they were debating this, they said a $2 billion. NFL stadiums do not cost $2 billion anymore. By the time you build this thing, that's going to be closer to $3 billion than it is $2 billion. And if you're talking about 70%, like that's a large sum that Clark Hunt would have to put forth himself there.
That's a fair point, because they're already building the Nashville Dome, and it started out at 1.8, and they've already had cost overruns. And then you add in everything else that they want to put around it for revenue generators. And yes, we're talking about a massive project. But that's the cost of doing business, right? And they're willing to step up and do that business. I've had a couple, comments, well, they're going to put this or that here or there. There is no set place. I think the most likely spot for the stadium, the leading candidate, I'm sure you've heard the same thing, northeast corner of I-70 and 435. So east of 435, north of I-70. But the practice facility is up for grabs. I think most people think that will be in Johnson County. You'll have a Wyandotte County stadium and a Johnson County practice facility. But I've heard Olathe, I've heard Overland Park, I've heard Lenexa. That is wide open. And I've heard that there are more than 12 different ideas and or locations for that. So stay tuned. But that's the other thing about this project is one financing covers both construction projects. Mm-hmm. Simple, easy for the team. Yeah. Right? Not how it would have worked in Missouri. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers. They've been helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other serious personal injuries here in Kansas City for years. Their attorneys have been serving for more than 40 years. They don't get paid unless they get money for their client. That's right. They don't get paid unless you get paid. Northland Injury Law, or the #1 accident lawyer in Kansas City. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT, H-U-R-T, to 22222. Again, if you have a case right now, text HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-HURT right now. 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertising. Again, if you have a case right now, text HURT to 22222 to get connected 24/7. Let's go to Isaiah Buggs here. Jeff Chadiha, tell me, there's something I'm missing as to why he's still on the roster. Is there a procedural thing? Is there a CYA thing that's going on here with the Chiefs? I mean, this would seem like when you're that far down the roster, Jimmy Johnson said a long time ago, I will not treat you all equally. I will treat you the way that you warrant being treated. Emmitt Smith could kind of nod off in a meeting. 53rd guy on the roster? No. Why is this still going on? And it's still under a Chiefs heading of any kind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they must see some kind of value in him. They've have a precedent of letting the law play out, or at least allowing things to go a lot longer than other organizations might have. It's these cases are a little bit weird. You have to kind of dig in and see what's happening. I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy, but just reading the stories or reading the details, it does seem like there's a lot of back and forth about, the police are after him, or was this negligence? Anytime a domestic thing is going on, you have a he said, she said type thing. So yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that he's still here, but given all the stuff that's happened over the last 4 or 5 years with his team, I mean, it shouldn't be that surprising, because they tend to stick it out and try to figure out what's going on with guys.
They're all on vacation, Sam. That's what Quinn said. That's one of the things. You've covered a lot of these types of things. What's your reaction to the fact that he's still on the roster?
Yeah, we've covered too many types of these things this summer. But I think it's the word that Jeff used, which is the precedent. I mean, they have put themselves in a corner here with, hey, we let this situation play out, and there's no guilty before innocent. And if you're going to have that same message for one, like I said, I think they put themselves in a corner for having that message for everyone. Which, I mean, look, in the court of law, it makes a lot of sense. But I mean, we know the Chiefs investigate these situations themselves as well. It's not just law enforcement. And there's a lot of smoke here. I don't know if there's fire, but there's a lot of smoke here with this Isaiah Buggs situation. And it's a lot to deal with for a guy that is not going to play a snap for the Chiefs this season, particularly because he's playing behind Mike Pennell.
Will he be in St. Joe? No, I heard. I heard.
Right.
What you said. I'm not going down Vanell Road.
That's right,
I'm not
that's
going
right.
down Nick Bolton's road. I'm not
Yeah.
going down any of them. Right. So
I don't think we see him in St. Joe.
Jeff.
I don't think we see him there either.
No, I think by St. Joe, the system will be handled. All right, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since '94. That's 30 years, folks. High risk accidents and liabilities in your lot. Get your lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot cuts down on accidents and keeps your parking lot as safe as possible. Plus, get your seal coating done now. This fall rolls around, and all of a sudden, everyone's calling to try to get it done before the cold weather comes. No cold weather. Easy to get done right now. Don't waste time. Get it done. No, you don't have to worry about it this winter. Call 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Top 5 quarterbacks all time. Does Patrick Mahomes crack the list? And if so, where does he get to? This should be fun. I saw some folks that were looking forward to seeing how we differ on this. Any criteria, anything in the exercise of figuring it out? We'll maybe go over some of the guys who missed the list. We're going to go 1 to 5, top to bottom here. But anything jump at you, Jeff, as you did this list, or was it pretty easy? Jardy, you kind of walk around with all the time.
It wasn't easy. I had a set list in my mind when I started the process, and as I began doing some of my, my research and trying to figure out an argument for each person, the hard thing to weigh is individual versus championships, numbers from different eras. It's obviously Mahomes is the wild card in all this. We all know this. It's like that's probably what this all revolves around. Where does he land? But even like trying to figure out, I hate to be the guy who kind of dumps on the Johnny Unitas people, those people, the Joe Namath, but it's hard to really look at them with the way the passing game has evolved and say, oh, this is, this guy should be in a top 10 list. It's just hard to do it. So I was probably a little harder on the older guys, but at the end of the day, I like the list I put together.
All right, Sam, anything jumping to you about the exercise?
Yes, totally echo what Jeff said. I mean, I think I might be accused of recency bias with my list, but I just think that quarterbacks are asked to do a lot more than they used to be, and by far the most difficult part was weighing the championship element of it and how much and how. Look, the championship, the Super Bowl element has to factor into it. The question, I think, for all three of us when we do this list is how significantly does it factor in?
Yeah, I agree. And that was one of the things that I kicked around. It weighs heavier for me that like I hear, it's what I do. It's kind of discuss different things like this. And so I've had this exercise before. I've done it before. And I always hear the Super Bowl thing more on this than I do sometimes, like maybe even more than I do on the coaches. Right. Like, and I don't know that that's fair. That's one of the things that jumped at me is how much the Super Bowl side of the equation was weighing on this for me. And I surprised myself with one where I ended up putting him as I went through it all. I think I went down a road and I was like, okay, I can't deny this. And I ended up putting somebody at a spot that I didn't think I'd put him. So I'll mention that when I get there. All right. We'll start at the top. Jeff, you want to lead us off? Who do you got at number 1?
No. I'm sure we're all in agreement on this, and it's Tom Brady. It's a no-brainer. He is miles ahead of everybody else in this category, not just the 7 Super Bowl wins, but 5 All-Pro appearances, 15 Pro Bowls, 3 MVPs, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, which is a record, the all-time leader in passing yards and touchdowns. He's the bar. I mean, there's no question about it. There's not enough time in this podcast to list everything he's done at that position during his career. So to me, there's no one close to him right now.
Sam?
Yeah, Brady's number 1, but I'll add just that the gap between him and anyone who could catch him, like a guy in Kansas City, widened when he not only beat him head-to-head in the Super Bowl, but when he went to a different organization to do it. So, yeah, I mean, obviously number 1, but just adding on the comment that the gap is pretty wide.
Had Tom Brady, I think that's a great point, Sam, because had Tom Brady gone down to Tampa and gone 9-8, playoff loss, then like, well, it was just as much Belichick. It was, the Patriot way, blah, blah, blah. But when he picked up, moved down there, promptly won a championship, and then cut through the guy who is become the strongest contender I mean, it's because none of the guys that are done. Aaron Rodgers is, I think, probably, Matt Stafford. I'll give a couple more names of some of the guys that statistically are up there. Everybody else is done, right? And so the guy who's got the best chance to run him down is Patrick Mahomes. And the fact that his team cut right through him is I hate it. And I said that going into that Super Bowl. This is big because Mahomes is probably not going to get another shot at him. This is like Brady's going to be perfect against him in the postseason if he doesn't win the Super Bowl. This one is giant for his legacy, and it still looms. It's not that it can't be overcome, but God, that is a killer.
Both games he was underdogs, right? In the AFC Championship game, were they underdogs when they came here the first time they played?
Yes, I think so.
What was Tampa? What was that, a 1-point line? Remember Julian Edelman made the shirts because they were underdogs in that game by like 3 points or something like that.
Yeah, it was low. It was low in both, but yes, I think so. They were, and that's going to be really hard. I mean, Mahomes is going to have to do something extra special. That's why I think like having a chance to win 3 in a row and do something Brady never did, or if he would have an undefeated season, highly unlikely with another game on there. And I guess if you're undefeated, you're going to get the 1 seed, so you won't have an extra playoff game, but. It's just he's going to have to find something that Tom Brady didn't do, whatever it is, whether it's statistically, whether it's, total games, win percentage. He's going to have to find something to do that Brady didn't, because those head-to-head games, I can just see myself, as an old fart in a bar in Chicago or something on vacation and some guy like, Brady 2-0 head-to-head. And it's like, I'm just have to turn around and drink my Corona. That's going to be all that I've got, for him. I've got Brady as well. There's nothing else that needs to be said. He's number one. But I do think, there's still a lot of football to be played for Patrick Mahomes if he can stay healthy. And so we'll see what he can do with it. All right, number 2 on the list, Jeff. Where do you go with number 2?
Joe Montana.
Okay.
And again, it's from 2 on down, it's probably going to be a lot of variation in what we do here. But Joe Montana, people forget the San Francisco 49ers were an awful team in the 70s until he started playing. They forget what football was like offensively until he and Bill Walsh connected. They forget that the Dallas Cowboys were one of the most dominant teams in the NFL until they got beat on a play that Joe Montana made to Dwight Clark. 4 Super Bowl wins, never lost, highest passer rating in the Super Bowl. Super Bowl MVP 4 times, I believe. No, 3 times. Jerry Rice got 1. But he's got 2 NFL MVPs, 5 All-Pro appearances, 8 Pro Bowls. Never threw an interception in a Super Bowl. Never had a bad game in a Super Bowl. He was, to me, and playing at a time when you had some of the most dominant defensive players in the game, keeps him in that spot.
I think that's a great case. Sam, you got Montana at number 2 on your list?
Yeah, I do. And I would just add on to it that his best performances came in the postseason. And he had 8 straight games where he had at least a 100 passer rating in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. You're playing against the best teams that the league has to offer, and you're playing at your absolute best. So now, I mean, he does have the benefit, like his defenses are really good, right? But that's why I look at what did he specifically do in the postseason to contribute to those Super Bowls. I do think the Montana thing was a little bit tougher for me than I think it would be for a lot of people, because he never led the league in passing yards against his own peers. He only twice led the league in touchdowns, again, against his own peers. I'm not comparing different eras. Those are against his own peers. And so I battled with number 2 before settling on Montana. Obviously, no knock against Joe Montana. I'm just saying it wasn't a slam dunk for me to rank him second. It's
crazy how far behind, to Sam's point, he is in yardage from Elway and Marino. I know those guys played a little longer, but he only has 40,000 passing yards. And again, he led the most, the biggest offensive revolution in the NFL in the last 40 years.
Well, I'll go you a step further because I'll step in here because he didn't make my list. He's not in my top 5. And one of the reasons he's not, 273 touchdowns is, to your point right there, 150 roughly behind Dan Marino. Okay. Right now, he won championships. But you just pointed out, when you look at the black ink, if you go to Pro Football Reference, completion percentage was his key. That's what it was. Yeah. And also Len Dawson. I mean, to me, he was a lot like Len Dawson was in his day, but they were great all over the place. Like, I am more bullish on the 49er dynasty part than I am the Joe Montana part, because guess what? Steve Young stepped in and played even better than Joe Montana. He had an even higher completion percentage. He had the highest completion percentage ever. Had Joe Montana been starting those games, I think he would have won all those games. There's somebody else that I think would have stepped in and won all those games. Joe Montana, to me, was the greatest system quarterback of all time, and he's one of the great quarterbacks of all time, and he would definitely be in a top 10 list for me. And at one time, he was in my top 5. But they won because Bill Walsh gamed the game across the board. He changed the game offensively. Their personnel is unreal, right? Their personnel is unreal over the years. And so because of that.
Not the beginning, though. In the first half of his run, it was Dwight Clark and Freddie Solomon.
In the first half of his run, it was the offense.
Yeah.
Like, that's where it was. Like, he was going up against, teams that were not taking anybody off the field, right? And he's throwing it like you've got 200 and, at the time, guys were huge at 245 at linebacker, but trying to cover Wendell Tyler and Roger Craig coming out of the backfield. And Joe Montana would flip it out to the running back a lot in the screen game. Brilliant offense. And Joe Montana, great quarterback, not top 5. Much more Bill Walsh than Joe Montana when it comes to the 49ers. So I do not have him in my top 5. Number 2 on my list, Patrick Mahomes. So I can't wait to hear where you guys have him. I've got him at number 2. 3 championships, a back-to-back, played in 4 Super Bowls, and already racking up the stats. One of only 3 guys with 50 touchdowns, over 5,000 yards. Statistically, he's there, and championships, he's there. He's got Marino-like statistics, but he's piling up Montana-like championships, right? There's no flaws in his game. Come from behind, down double digits in the Super Bowls. Why are they winning Super Bowls? Because of him. Down 10 with 7 to go against the 49ers, wins. He's been down in each one of the Super Bowls, and he's been playing first place schedules. He's been picking last. And how many Hall of Famers are on this team? We went over this, when we talked dynasties. This guy has had Chris Jones himself, not counting him, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill for one of his championships. Who else is going to be a Hall of Famer?
Terrell Suggs.
I mean, yes, integral part.
Was Darrell Revis there at the end?
Integral part of the championship run. I think, and I know it'll be controversial, and I think the safe thing would be to put Patrick Mahomes down further and then be like, he's got so much time to do it. I think he's already number 2. He's already number 2. And I don't know what you can dig him for.
I would dig him for what has he done that nobody else on this list has already done? What separates him? I mean, the numbers don't separate him. The championships don't separate him.
Throw a left-handed pass, perfect the no-look pass.
That's
limp
going way down super fast on this.
Limp through an entire playoff and win while hurt. No. Carry a team on one leg.
Look, I mean,
that's a pretty weak argument.
Joe Montana, they carried off the field every time he got hit. Every time.
Go ahead, Sam. I'll let you jump in.
I will jump in because, like, when I said it was hard to put, like, that it was not a slam dunk for Montana at number 2 is because it was between him and Patrick Mahomes. So, like, Mahomes is 3rd on my list. And I think that here's Soren, just to feed you some arguments here. What Patrick Mahomes has done is gone from the gunslinging quarterback and completely changed his game and won in different ways. That I think that's what separates him to me with these guys on this list is he's had to win in different ways in the era where you have got more film, more analytics, more numbers, more ways to scout offenses. It's the offense that has to change at the end of the day. And Patrick Mahomes himself has been the guy to change. There's a reason that, I mean, I've mentioned this stat multiple times on the podcast, but there's a reason why he's the only quarterback to occupy a certain number of the cap and still win. It's him. Like, to Soren's point, he is the reason they've won 4 Super Bowls. And with these other guys on the list, like every single year, Tom Brady hasn't played his best in Super Bowls. You can pick the Patriots defense and potentially say that's the reason they won this year. We've made arguments against Joe Montana for the same reason with the supporting cast. I mean, one year, Joe Montana's entire secondary for the 49ers made the Pro Bowl. One year, all 4 of them did.
That was, by the way, that was the team that Jeffri Chadiha said wasn't talented.
So like the
on offense,
like there is no question that every single year the Chiefs have won the Super Bowl, the number one reason has been Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's the separator from him on the list. And the reason why the number two was 2A and 2B for me. And I initially had Mahomes second, and he will be second. There's no doubt he's going to pass Joe Montana on this list. But for now, I do think overall resume, 4 championships, and like I said, the way that Joe Montana played in the postseason really stood out to me as well.
Jeff asked the question, what has he done that the other guys on this list haven't done? I mean, Joe Montana never went to 4 Super Bowls in 5 years. Neither did Tom Brady.
He won 4.
Brady did. Brady did it.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
He did go to 4 and 5 and won 3.
He went to 4 and 5. Yeah.
He went to 3, but
they won all the ones they went to. First run.
No, but if that's
I actually don't like. I don't like.
How does that not count?
But losing in the NFC Championship game is somehow given more credit than losing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, a second place finish should not be worse than a third place finish. And like it's that way in the NBA too, where suddenly LeBron has made finals and lost. Like it's still better than losing in the conference championship. And it remains that the stat that I mentioned about Mahomes when we ranked the dynasties, like it's still true that he's never trailed at the end of regulation AFC Championship game. Like there's another separator from him from guys on this list. Like all 6 years of his career, he's never not played in an AFC title game, and every year he's at least been tied at the end of regulation of the game.
Again, the point I'm making here is that we're starting to split hairs here. Like for him to be number 2, he's got to be so far ahead of everybody else in some category. And it can't just be, he's on his way to doing these things.
What's the category that Joe Montana is so far ahead of?
4-0. Never lost championship, never lost Super Bowl. He's had the 122 passes in the Super Bowl. Never do a pick.
But you would consider 4-0 better than 4-1.
Yeah, that's called math. That's right. 100% is better than 80%.
So then Eli Manning,
I know that. We don't need Eric Eager here to spell that out for us.
And
I take 4-1 to be honest. I take 5 AFC championship wins. Like I would take 4-1.
Magic Johnson, I think, was 5-3 or 5-4 in the NBA Finals, and the fact that he would take teams into the finals is a positive. When you run into good competition and you lose, I'd rather see you win more playoff series. So that means Patrick Mahomes won more playoff games. That doesn't matter. I don't understand how it's just a championship game. Then I expect to see Eli Manning on your top 5 because the guy got to the playoffs twice, and both times he went to the Super Bowl and won it. So that must be he's got to be third on your list then.
So if their career stopped right now and it was Joe Montana won 4 championships and Patrick Mahomes won 3, you'd sit here and tell me Patrick Mahomes won more than Joe Montana.
What was
I wouldn't tell you 3 is more than 4, but I would tell you that Patrick Mahomes is ranked ahead of Joe Montana. I watched Joe Montana dink and dunk his way through the West Coast.
But now we're talking about talent, though. That's a whole different thing.
Can I just point out, Joe Montana's not the only guy.
This is not a first grade math quiz where Allie the alligator points to who has more championships. That's not what we're doing here. It's who was the best quarterback. Who are the best quarterbacks of all time?
He's not the only one to go 4-0, right? Didn't Terry Bradshaw go?
Bradshaw went 4-0.
But his numbers are nowhere close to these guys. I looked at it like championships and numbers. What's that?
How come the numbers of Mahomes don't count?
They count now, but he doesn't have the numbers that anybody else on this list has. You're projecting out what he's going to become, not where he's at.
Well, I've got my third on this list. Then Jeff, I'm interested. Is Mahomes third on your list, or are you going to with someone else third?
Oh well,
he's not.
You mentioned Manning.
I'm in at 5. Let me make a prediction.
Yeah, you mentioned Manning, and I'm going with Peyton at 3.
Okay. All right. I don't mind that one. I might reach through the camera and slap you if you said Eli.
Yeah, no. And that was the one I almost put Mahomes at 3. I walked into it thinking he's 3. And then I remembered Peyton Manning has 5 MVPs. And Peyton Manning was an all-pro, first team all-pro 7 times, which is the most in history. He had 14 Pro Bowl appearances. He left the game as the all-time leader in passing touchdowns, passing yards. 2 championships, 4 appearances. That's where I would ding him at. But the numbers, the way he played, a lot of people thought he was a better quarterback than Tom Brady for most of his career. And for me, that's what separated him. Now, you can make the case. Now, Patrick having the championships, that was hard to ding him on that. But I think overall,
But you found a way.
Five MVPs is a lot of MVPs. 5 MVPs is a lot of MVPs.
Oh, I have nothing. I have nothing to ding Peyton Manning with. Absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Peyton Manning is on my list, so you will not hear any kind of negative feedback from me about Peyton Manning, because I'll go here. I too have Peyton Manning number 3. 4 appearances, because I give him credit for the 2 Super Bowl losses, right? That's still success. 4 Super Bowl appearances with 2 different teams and a resurrection. I remember doing the show when everyone was paranoid about Peyton Manning coming to the Broncos for. He never played a game, but the move was there. And I said, listen, I don't know what everyone's so worried about. I can't remember I think he was 36 then. And I looked it up, and there had been one 30-touchdown passing season in the history of all quarterbacks that age or older. Now, Tom Brady hadn't gotten that old yet, right? Like a lot of guys at that time, it was Warren Moon had thrown for 30 touchdowns. And so, I'd taken a look at okay, Peyton Manning should be on the severe downslope of his career. And he got better, right? He got even better. He threw 55 touchdowns. He threw for, set a new passing yards record at almost 5,500. So early in his career, late in his career, throughout his career, he did everything. And he just happened to run into Tom Brady. If Tom Brady wasn't there, where would he have been? In tennis, where would Djokovic be if he didn't have Nadal? And if you take one of those guys out, where would the other 2 have been? When you just have 3 great guys. Manning was the nemesis to Tom Brady, and he was fantastic. Statistically, he was the Dan Marino, and Tom Brady was more the winner, and Brady's then started to pick up the statistics later in his career. Peyton Manning started to pick up the winning later in his career. I got no rub. Peyton Manning gets number 3 for me as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in here just because he's 4th on my list. So obviously, I've gone Brady, Montana, Mahomes, and it's not only the 5 MVPs. He finished runner-up 3 times, so 8 times he was voted either the best or the second best player in the league. And I mean, there's a little bit of eye test for me with Peyton Manning, because I thought during that era there was no quarterback I'd rather have leading, in a 2-minute drill situation, got a score, and that included Tom Brady. Peyton was the guy I wanted with the ball. Had to have a touchdown in that situation.
Yeah, no, he was phenomenal. All right, so he makes all 3 of our lists. That takes us to number 4 on your list, Jeff.
That's where Patrick Mahomes lands.
Right.
So you made a bad bet.
Everybody can just calm F down. There's nothing wrong, even though
people were nervous. Is he going to put him on the list?
I wasn't nervous. I know football, and I know there was no way he was going to be left off your list. I had no worries about that.
It could have been 3. He was 3 for a long time until I started looking at the numbers. Because, as Sam said, there's a recency bias here. You begin to forget what other people have done. You begin to think that what you see now is the standard, and what before was kind of this whatever, just old man, like not, like black and white TV almost type, like you're watching Bob Cousy versus Michael Jordan or something. And ultimately, Patrick Mahomes is on this list because he can do things other people can't do. And he has done things that on a football field I've never seen people do. And the only thing that I would say about him that keeps him at 4 right now, again, the championships were big. And I know it hurts people to say this. In the Super Bowl, he has not been at his best. And he's had 2 games in the Super Bowl out of 3 where he was not the best player on the field. He got the MVP, but his numbers, given where he actually plays at, what he's done, weren't anywhere close to what we've come to see. And Tom Brady has had huge games, obviously. Joe Montana's had huge games. Peyton Manning was kind of where he's at because he didn't do the same thing. So that's where I started to split hairs, was looking at that element of it. And also, everybody else on my list started with a dog crap team. That means something to me. When you start out with a team that has been losing for decades or for over a decade or for years, you start out with coaches that get changed out. As good as Tom Brady was, people forget that team was about to fire Bill Belichick because they hadn't been winning. Drew Brees, they were 6-10 the year before. They were 2-14 when I think he took it over. So, I mean, there was a lot going on with all those teams. Montana, I mentioned. Peyton Manning was with a lousy team with the Colts. And so that's not to say Patrick Mahomes wouldn't be great anyway, but I think it's a heavier lift when you got to take on a whole organization and basically build them back up.
So Jeff, which Super Bowls do you think that Mahomes was not the best player on the field?
The first one and the second one.
Who was in the first one?
I'd say Chris Jones played better.
He didn't have a sack in that game, right?
He batted
He
out
had three passes. Look at his numbers compared to what he's done.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he threw 2 picks. It wasn't his best day, but in the end, he rallied them and
Yeah.
plays.
They won the games, yeah, but it wasn't like he dominated the game or had moments where you're like.
I will grant you, I think in years gone by, Damian Williams probably would have won the MVP award. You know, didn't Timmy Smith win it for the no, Doug Williams. Did Doug Williams get it the year Timmy
Doug
Smith?
Williams got it.
Okay. And he had an incredible say. He had a better, bigger day than Patrick Mahomes had, certainly, in that first Super Bowl. So I do get where you're coming from on that. But, yeah, I will tell you, it hasn't been his best performances statistically overall because he's been up against really good teams.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and yet he still found a way to win. So,
Yeah.
But I hear where you're coming from. I do. And I have no rub with him being 4th. Right? Like, I disagree, but as long as he's in the top 5, I don't. If he had him 5th, I wouldn't have him. If it's like not on the list, then we were gonna have words. All right. So my number 4. So we've got your 4. Jeff has Patrick Mahomes 4. Sam has Peyton Manning. I'm gonna go with a guy who has 4 MVPs. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers. This is the guy I sat down, I had my 5 in my head, and I'm like, okay, let's look at how I'm going to support what it is I'm going to say here. Let me get the information. And then I went back and I remembered, like, Aaron Rodgers versus Kurt Warner, one of the greatest passing things I've ever seen. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is probably the best thrower of the football, better than Patrick Mahomes. I think, Mahomes maybe will get there, but the accuracy is absolutely insane. His ability to throw just over the fingertips of defenders and into his guys' hands. There is a leadership problem. I mean, I'm not going to lie. And leadership is part of quarterbacks. And that's why he's not number 1. He is the best pure passer I have ever seen. And that includes Patrick Mahomes. But there's more to being a quarterback than that. He has escapability. He is elusive. He gets sacked a lot. But I think that's also because he doesn't give up on plays and he's nobody's bitch. Like, he's tough back there. Right. And so he will take a hit. So he does get sacked more than I would like because I think he can control that. Where Peyton Manning will turtle and throw it out. Rodgers should probably get a little more Peyton Manning in him. But he has only had 3 years where he had double-digit interceptions. His touchdown to interception ratio is 475 to 105. No one has ever thrown the football better. He does at least have the 1 championship and 4 MVPs. Aaron Rodgers is number 4 on my list.
Rodgers has only had 1 year in his last 14 seasons where he's won more than 1 playoff game in a year. And like, I agree with you that it's like we all said that the most.
I did not want him here. Can I reiterate?
The most difficult element for all of us was Wayne. How do you view the playoff success versus the regular season success in this? But man, I mean, I think we all had to at least look at Aaron Rodgers' case when we're coming up with this top 5 because he's at least worthy of consideration. But man, just the lack of playoff success that he's had just really slaps you over the face.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I definitely hear where you're coming from, and it was, and I didn't want him on here, but I do think there's got to be something that said. I think he is, advanced the passing game as much as anybody. And again, I'll say it again, the best pure passer I've ever seen.
I agree with that. No.
So he goes at number 4 for me. 5 for you, Jeff.
I wanted to go with Aaron Rodgers. I wanted to go with a couple other guys here, but I'm going with a favorite of Kansas City Chiefs fans, John Elway.
Okay.
And surprisingly, his playoff record is a lot better than I thought it was. He's 14-7 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right behind Brady, Montana, Mahomes overall for this exercise. But I mean, the thing about him is that I know that he had to wait until late in his career to get the success he had, but I think most scouts will tell you that outside of Andrew Luck, maybe someone threw out Trevor Lawrence more recently. He was the gold standard in terms of prospects coming into the league. I mean, Soren and I were old enough to remember when he showed up, and it was a big deal. Like, he was that level. And for him to play as long as he did, to get 2 championships in 5 years, I don't think it was much on the losses because he was going against the Redskins, the Giants.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, Bill Parcells, Joe Gibbs, and I think it was it George Seifert at the end, or was it Seifert at the end?
Yeah. When they got housed, that was
Seifert, right?
No, that was Walsh.
Was Walsh there, and he retired after that?
No, it was Seifert's first.
It was Seifert. It was Seifert's first.
I think
it was the back-to-back. And so, I mean, he had 50,000 passing yards. He wasn't a great passer. His completion percentage is what knocked him down for me. He was a 57% passer. But I think he ran for a lot of yards. He's 11th all time in rushing yards, over 3,000 rushing yards, 30-some TDs on the ground. He was as good as it gets. I mean, he's as good as it gets.
I've got him 5 also. Sam, do you?
No, I don't. I mean, if we had 10, I think I would probably put him in there. But I don't think you want to quote about your number 5 quarterback. He's not a great passer.
Yeah. That's why he's where he's at.
But I will.
He was a better passer. Move up.
Yeah, he's not Aaron Rodgers, right? But listen, I knew that there's a lack of black ink on his resume as well because I've looked at it enough times. But I also know how
much of the interception column.
No, in the interception column, he's got 226, which for that era was
that shit wasn't bad. It's about average.
Yeah, about average. I mean, it's a little bit high. There's a little bit of Brett Favre in him, right? There's a little bit of the gunslinger, like too in love with the arm. And I think once he got paired up, got Mike Shanahan back, and late in his career, he started getting that a little bit under control. But it was also still a little bit of a different game. And I think they took more shots. You're going to see his yards per attempt. You're going to be like, well, that's not that good. It's because they took the ball down the field, right? Like, it was their completion percentage wasn't – you didn't grab the 5-yard check down and a completion. You got an interception after you tried to go 24. I'm just saying there is a bit of an eye test. And he was an assassin, and he was great late. And I maintain that he would have won every championship that Joe Montana did and a couple more had he played for the 49ers. Had he had Bill Walsh as his coach, had he had that talent, I am adamant that John Elway is better than Joe Montana. Adamant that he is better than I don't care where we want to put these guys, but for me, John Elway should always be ranked ahead of Joe Montana. If you put Montana on the Broncos, 500-ish. Because they needed Elway's arm. They needed him to run around, buy time, and then send it 40 yards down the field. And who the hell did he play with? Finally, he got Shannon Sharp at the end of his career. But like the 3 amigos, hang on, Sam. Let's see. Jeff could probably name them. Can you name the receivers that made up the 3 amigos? Don't Google it. Get your hand away from that computer.
Yeah, Vance Johnson.
No, I know you can.
Yeah,
I know you can. Sam, is there any way? No. Mark Jackson, Vance Johnson, and Ricky Nattiel. And somehow this was a thing, and they weren't even very good. And he was dragging that sack of crap to the Super Bowl year after year after year.
Remember the big tailback they had, the long neck guy, number 30? Was Steve Sewell? Was that his name?
Steve Sewell, yeah. From OU,
yeah.
Oh, Steve Sewell, Gerald Wilhite. He went into the Super Bowl with something called Gerald Wilhite and Steve Sewell in the backfield. It was like an epiphany when they got Bobby Humphrey. Yeah. They all lost their Bobby Humphrey. Look at this guy. Yeah. Then he got Terrell Davis and he won 2 championships. So that's my case for John. And I don't like putting John Elway on there because he's a Bronco, but he was great. All right, wrap us up here, Sam. Who you got?
Well, obviously somebody that's not on your guys' list, but I thought when I tried to look back at guys that are not current era guys, I looked at how do they compare to their peers? And the guy that was the biggest separator from his peers on the list was Dan Marino. So he's 5th on my list.
That's fair.
And, when he threw for 48 touchdowns his second year in the NFL, the previous high in a season was 36. And I know 10 guys get to 36 every year now, so that doesn't seem like a large number. 133% of what anybody in the NFL had ever done when Dan Marino got 48 touchdowns. There was a guy from NFL I think it was Next Gen Stats that a couple of years ago had tried to modern day what hit that season would be in like today's era, and he came up with like almost 6,000 yards and almost 60 touchdowns is what would be the equivalent of today, based on what quarterbacks were doing then versus what quarterbacks are doing now. Like that's how different he was compared to his peers. But also when you look into some of his numbers to try and make the case for Dan Marino, what really stands out is like how incredible he was actually at sack avoidance. Like he led the NFL in sack avoidance 10 years. 10 years he had the lowest sack. Like he did not take negative plays. And I realized that there's no championships. And if there was even, I think, one championship, he'd probably be in everyone's top 5. If he had 2 championships, I think he'd be an argument for some people to be in the top 2 or 3. So I understand the no championships, and it's why off the top of this I said it was hard to rate certain guys because of the championship situation, and he's the reason why that it's difficult to put somebody in the top 5 that didn't win a Super Bowl. But his comparison to his peers for that era was unlike anybody else I think on the list, to be honest.
Yeah, I have no problem with Dan Marino being there. The championship part is the thing to get over. And I do think he was so great early. He's somewhat a victim of his early success, but his later years, he was just kind of blah.
Yeah.
You know,
well, he's got the Achilles injury, right? I mean, that certainly changed his.
No, but here's his touchdowns by year: 20, 48, 30, 44, 26, 28, 24, 21, 25, 24. Like he only had one other 30 touchdown season after that. And so the Achilles injury didn't happen until like he was late.
Yeah, it was like 34, 35.
Yeah, it was like 92, 93. But look, I mean, when you match him up against John Elway and like passing numbers, similar eras, by the way, like there's no comparison.
No, you're right.
Between the John Elway numbers versus Dan Marino numbers. The difference is the championships, and that should be a difference. Like that does matter. So I understand why somebody would rank him higher because of that reason, but like that's the only thing, and it's a big thing. I'm not trying to dismiss that, but everything else on the list favors Dan Marino.
We're proudly brought to you here on the Red Gold and Bold podcast by anybody. Well, first of all, before we wrap up, let's say this: anything you want to throw out, anyone that was a close miss, or anyone you want to acknowledge here going out the door, Jeff?
Well, Aaron Rodgers was close. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Marino were the 3 I had to cut off my list. That different names, different times. Maybe 10 years ago, you're having a different conversation, but they just, Aaron and Brett had the MVPs, but Marino, without having a championship, won MVP, was hard to put him in this group.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, some of the past era, but like I said, I think the quarterbacks back then were not asked to do what they are now. I think Drew Brees is a really underrated quarterback. And then, the obvious that I'm sure is on your list, Soren, is Troy Aikman.
Yeah, no, he's nowhere to be found. But I will pick up the baton. I'm not even going to. Another one I'm going to let just go by. I will add.
I do want to make clear. I totally agree with you on Troy Aikman.
Okay,
that needs to be with me as well.
There is a guy who is littered with black ink and won championships, and he's from the old time, and I think was way ahead of his time when it came to passing. That was one of the guys that was in the running for number 5. Joe Montana was one of my hardest cuts. Joe Montana's. Or this guy would be number 6 on my list, and maybe sometime I would end up changing it. But John Unitas was so far ahead of the game from his time. We had the consecutive games with a touchdown pass that was like 40 something, and the second one was like 8. I don't know what it was. It was ridiculous, and that record didn't get broken for like 20 years as the passing game evolved. Maybe even more. Maybe
it was like 40 years.
Yeah, it was like 40 years before it got broken.
Peyton broke it.
Yeah, he did some things that people just hadn't done to that point. Great leader, tough, would run the ball. Not a great runner, not a great athlete, but I think John Unitas is the one guy of the old time that deserves some credit, and he would definitely be in my top 10 and made a strong case to be in my top 5.
7 top 3 MVP finishes for Johnny Unitas.
And
one wins 3 of them. So again, when you're comparing era to era among his peers, 7 times top 3 MVP finish.
By far the best quarterback of his time, and played
Rams.
Yeah, his Ram days were San Diego or Chargers.
I said autogram. I thought you were going to say autogram.
Oh, I thought you said his Ram days, and I was like, no, wait a minute, that was Namath.
That was
Namath. The Chargers.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. You can find them online if you've got any problems with the parking lot, ganasphalt.com. And by our friends at Northland Injury Law, voted #1 injury lawyers in Kansas City. They've been serving KC for more than 40 years. They don't get paid unless you get paid. Text HURT, HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. It's Northland Injury Law. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.